Good evening, everybody. How is everybody doing tonight? Welcome back to an experience of the African Speaks. Now, we've been talking and talking and talking about the coming of the Ubuntu generation. And we've been doing this in both stages, meaning, or both levels, transgenerational, where we talk about it with Akibaland, and then we also have on Tuesday nights, we go deeper into the discussion. So if you do have Akibaland kids that have come to the experience, have these conversations with them. Let them look at it and see if they can actually be open to the deeper dive into the subjects. Because you never know who you have, the spirit that you have in the room sitting with you, even though they're younger. Let their awareness be experienced with you and through you. Right. So tonight we want to make sure we slow it down before we begin and take a deep breath. Let's breathe together. Let us inhale and exhale. We get the gift of breath and the breath of life from the same source. There is not one thing living on this earth that does not get the breath of life from the universal source, the Most High. And so, in this spirit and in this journey, as we travel to the deconstruction of our psyche, we need to make sure, and I'm not asking you to breathe because I'm telling you to breathe, but as we travel towards the deconstruction of our life, we need to understand that we have to find a relaxed state because the life in which we live in keeps our nervous system tight. I have a friend who's always, she's always jittery. I grew up with a friend in New York, Yusef Khalil. One love, man. He was always, he couldn't stop it. And so we have those situations and circumstances where that survival mode becomes embedded. Some people don't wait till 12. Some people just grabs them early. So we want to breathe and we want to relax and we want to be able to receive the information as much as possible. Because this is definitely a journey to your best self in my community, we say. It's a journey to deeper self-awareness. It's a journey for you to realize who and whose you are and why you're here. It is the coming of the Ubuntu generation. Transgenerational experience through African philosophy. And so we walk down the lane of where we are because we always recap just in case somebody's watching new. I want to recap after a while when we get deeper and deeper because there's a lot of lessons here. We will refer you to the recorded and uploaded live streams. So if you're watching in any shape, form, or fashion or new, like, comment, share. YouTube, subscribe, connect. So we started out in this space of understanding Ubuntu by dealing with who were we before the world defined us. And we talked about Afro consciousness. We labeled it Afro consciousness, which is the understanding that every relation, all our connection is based off a relationship. It's relational. Everything was based off a relationship. Our relationship to the earth, our relationship to each other, our relationship to our ancestors, our relationship to the Creator. It all connected. And knowing that's before anything was defined. That was before civilization manifested. Our understanding of our connectedness was the base of our Afro consciousness, which is the base of Ubuntu. So then we went on to, well, what happened? And so for those who have seen this before, let this continue to settle into you. Start asking yourselves, are you realizing some of the information that has been taught in some of these classes and lessons? Because the next step we talked about was that African mindset, which comes from the Afro consciousness, is still inside us. It's still in there, buried behind the colonialized mindset. And we said a lot of things that we as people of the African diaspora, because this is not just focused on the African American. This is diasporic. We are half African and half the colonialized mind, and that mindset is always at battle. That's that psychological warfare. Sometimes it's a spiritual warfare that's in us. It can turn into physical warfare. But there is always that constant battle, and anytime you have that warfare with you against you for the betterment of you, man, that alone will drive you crazy. And so we went there and we started looking at what that looks like when they fight each other and what we go through. All of us got these preconditioned health issues. And that's why we can't have a good healthcare system, because they know that this country is set up on compressing the nervous system, which causes the degeneration of your nervous system, which is we'll talk about later, but which is also the issue of ailment. You don't know who you are. You think you're this sickly body, and then when I listen to a lot of people actually accept this their medical condition, not realizing it manifested from a spiritual deficiency. You don't want to deal with your. I'm not saying run away from medical doctors, but also deal with your spiritual deficiency. Because then, if you can loosen up your spine, your nervous system, the flow of energy, the body itself can help you heal. And then we talked about the kingdom within, the identity as spiritual technology. We discussed how, as a culture, our identity was connected to how we lived. We knew that our experience of the kingdom of God, if that's the kingdom of the Most High, the heaven within, was a state of consciousness. Oh, some people may not like that. It's more than that. Do you understand how profound your consciousness is? It's a limitless experience. And if you dive deep inside yourself, you get to a place where nothing exists except the presence and power of who you are, which is directly connected to the presence and power of the Creator, which is where you get that identity as spiritual technology. You are easily able to transfer into that sovereignty, where there is nothing above you but your relationship and connection to the Creator. It's a beautiful thing when you look at who you were called to be before colonialism, who you defined yourself as before the war within. And then we talked about coming from that state of understanding where we were and how we existed, and how Ubuntu goes beyond to the point of just saying I am because we are, but it really gives us a spiritual, mental, emotional, and cosmic identity. A cosmic I am because we are. We can't exist without the oxygen in the air. And when we inhale that oxygen, we breathe out carbon dioxide, which the trees inhale. This is a harmony. This is balance. And Ubuntu is so much deeper than just cultural identity. It's a cosmic awareness. And so we said we went from there to saying, okay, what are some of the tools that can get us back to that space? And the first one we said was language, using language as programming, words as neurological architecture, meaning that you can say something to yourself, you can say something to someone else that triggers a state of ease, a state of peace, a state of reprogramming for you to access your higher self, a better state. You can reprogram and decondition yourself just by the language you use. That's why we couldn't speak our language, because they knew that language and our sounds had power. Story. I remember speaking to an Ashanti princess and was asking her to come up on the show. Obviously, it never happened. But in that conversation, she said, "I will give you as much conversations as you want to have." And so I was investigating the power of sound. And she said when she was getting a divorce from her husband, they were having this family gathering, and since they hadn't been divorced yet, he's still at the family gathering and would probably continue being at the family gathering even after the divorce. And the women were sitting in the kitchen having dialogue. And every time the husband walked in the room, the wife would, in front of her aunts, her female cousins, the women of the family, her elders. But it was the women of the family. And they, after the third time, they halted, said, "Excuse us. You have to stop that. What are you saying? What are you doing at that moment with that sound of disapproval or disgust or distance? Your sour thought." She said that energy is a curse on that man. Now, most women, African American, won't even understand it. Yep, she deserves it. We don't understand when we're functioning from programming. But they told her, you can't do that anymore, because that curses him. And in turn, the curse that you put on him will be expressed in his lack of productivity in life. And he will not be able to be the father he is called to be for the children. He's already not the husband. But you continue with the behavior of your sound, and your language around him and to him will curse him. And then what you have is what you produced. And she looked at them. So you can't do this to him. What you have to do is learn how to forgive. If not, you are cursing the development that he needs to go through so that he can be a whole father for them, if he can't recover the relationship. And she said she had to pause and think about that. The programming, the neurological architecture that she sent out. And so we have to learn how to speak life to each other. And I know I have a hard time of accepting when somebody wants to say something and it doesn't sound like life. I don't even let them finish their sentences, because I don't need to hear the language, because I'm not going to have you program me into seeing, feeling, and hearing or believing anything that comes out that does not get me to my higher self. Can I be criticized as long as at the end of your conversation you're giving me some helpful tips that truly don't get me to what you want me to be? Get me to who you see me in God. So we talked about this, the quality of language. And from that, we went on to, and this one touched me completely, to discussing about the self-governance and emotional regulation, being able to rule the inner world. Now, any of these can be seen on, the African Speaks YouTube page if you haven't seen them yet. Facebook starts deleting your live streams after a certain time. So, yeah. But we talked about this. And in order, they said, a king who cannot rule himself cannot rule the village. And so you got to be able to process emotions that stir up. And it's natural to have emotions of anger. It's natural to be depressed. It's natural to be sad. Nobody is always up. Very few people are always up. And if they're always up, it's a front. Because you get mad at something. You get anxious at something. But it's not whether or not you feel those feelings, it's how you choose to express them. And so that's the part that really hit me. I said, because I went back in my past and said, my recent past, to sit down and say, brother, your emotional regulation, when was the last time you split your wig, popped your top? And I'm around the kids all the time, and so we have fun. But man, I'm trying to tell you, I can remember some times where I lost it with a couple of adults. And I said, I had to sit back and realize I'm dealing with my conditioned self. I had to pause and say, okay, brother, it's time for you to reevaluate traits that you have now become aware of because of this lesson. And you got to fix it. And so in that space, when I realized that, I said, okay, we got the next conversation. And tonight's discussion is about the amnesia of the diaspora. The amnesia of the diaspora. Now, we talked about this in Akiba Land already, and we dealt with this when we talked about remembering before slavery. And I said, we sit in a state of amnesia. And one of the kids said, wow, raise his hand. I'll say his name, Ramani. Asked, what is amnesia? And so just for the adults, because we know, I've seen it on TV. I hadn't seen it personally until this lesson. And I realized the amnesia that I have, the amnesia that we have. But we're going to take a look at it clinically first. It's partial or total memory loss. Clinically, it's when you hit your head so bad, your brain shakes. Difficulty recalling information. Now they got things that they put in your food and diets that cause Alzheimer's, and you can't recall any information. So us having an opportunity to actually get elders who can hold on to the data to share it transgenerationally. They know what they're doing. We're being attacked on so many different levels. It's ridiculous. We got to be aware of it. Impaired ability to learn new information. You hit a block and your learning is halted. Amnesia. Something is happening with your brain. You can't learn. You can't be. I remember and I had to break a point in my life where technology was moving so fast. And if you don't move with technology, it passes you by. And I had to sit and sweat and shake and get frustrated. I had to push myself past my own level of amnesia, where I began to be impaired to learning something new. Now, my brain is always open and ready for it. The unable to recognize faces or locations. Now, again, we're still talking about clinical, but we can relate this to us as a people, and we're about to do that. So you don't recognize somebody that looks like you, melanated like you, nose shaped like yours, lips full. You can't recognize a familiar face. and you think that's a foreign face? Then you have false memories. I know quite a few people who wrestle with perception, where they perceive a concept, an idea, or an experience in a particular way where that's not how it happened. Is that what you really got from that? That didn't happen like that. Amnesia. I've been in several scenarios where I had to have people who were witnessing saying, that didn't happen like that. And I don't even know how you was able to pick that one up. That shows you how bad amnesia gets. And we don't know the level of amnesia that we have until we come across life's experiences that show us. And then you have the uncoordinated movements. You just forget how to function. Disorientation. Again, all of these can be equated to the African experience, the experience of the diaspora, the amnesia of the diaspora that is caused by trauma. And so before we get to that and we break this down, we have to understand that for us, the African diaspora, we are dealing with the issue of the constitution of man. You're like, what? It is the constitution of man that makes us embody our amnesia. And when I say constitution, you can't have a country without papers that govern the country. United States Constitution, in which way we live. And it shows the laws, rights, and the structure and dynamics of how society or the civilization of that society lives. Now that's governmental structure. We all vote to try to get that right. However, it is about order. And so when we're talking about the amnesia of the diaspora, diasporic amnesia, we're discussing the order of man. And when I say man, I'm not talking about gender. When I say man, I'm talking about mankind. We will create man in our image, one male, one female. And so there are certain areas of constitution. What gives the man the process or the governing structure for him to live life. As for that African man, it was a couple of things. His spirit is a part of his constitution. That's the essence of his being, his divine origin. Where is he from? The other part that adds to the constitution of man is his mind, the interpreter, how he interprets the world around him. The next phase is the body. The body being the vessel in which the spirit lies. How he views this, how he treats this will actually define also his constitution, his memory. And that's that ancestral field. The ancestral field, what does he remember and what information he is being given from those who are gone before and those who will come after and those who may never be. Where consciousness having a physical experience. And we do have a channel that mind has the ability to access the memory of the ancestral field and the memory within our DNA. We'll get to that. And then the will, that creative authority that says, I can do this, I can do that, I can do. Not I can't, but I can. And at any given time you saying I can't, you need to check your constitution. Because when you tap into the spirit, your mind processes who you are correctly, your body is aligned, your memory is open, you already know there is nothing that you can't achieve. There's nothing that you can't do. This is why everybody locks in on the Olympics, because you see the will of the individual to express themselves to the fullest. And that is the constitution of man. And so colonialism didn't start with just taking the land. That was probably like phase 1. Phase 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 was right here. Well, I think I can say it's reverse. This was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And taking the land was number 10. They had to create a fictional statement and argument within their own minds to believe it's okay to enslave another being. They had to falsify the reality within themselves. First, European society, colonialism, to say it's okay. They had to devise theology to say it's okay. And had to ignore history, culture, tradition, and what we've given to humanity to say what they did is okay, what they do is okay. So it created, we started out one way. Now we function, and every single black person does this. There is not a black person on the world, in the diaspora or the continent, that does not suffer from spiritual amnesia. Or, there are levels where everybody has, it's in there. But it's amnesia. And so, when you know that you're dealing with spiritual amnesia, easy. And this is a short list for the sake of the show. It is, you're stuck in survival mode, thinking you just I got to make it. I got to have this. You're surviving. You're not manifesting. You're not glowing. If you're out of survival mode, when you realize that you are in a slave state, the only thing that matters out of survival mode is your fight for the liberation of your people and the redemption to humanity. Anything less, you're still in survival mode. And so people, I'm not a slave. Well, okay, so show me, what are you doing that leads to the liberation of a people and the redemption to humanity, to return man back to the focus on the Most High, utilizing the most oldest wisdom on the planet, African wisdom. Yeah, you don't hear too many people talking about that. Then you have the external validation seeking. You know, if you're trying to keep up with the Joneses or be the Joneses, and social media is making it worse for our children. Our children seek the validation of the outside of themselves. I gotta make you like me, and I'm not liked without the likes, comments, and shares. Okay, no. I'm grateful for every person that clicks. Why? Because this is what I do. When I started it, I got no support from my community. And it becomes different. It becomes developed after a while. Because he's for real. Then you have the fragmented community structures. At one point, we were coming out of slavery. The black man and woman, that connection was powerful. I read a book, the Conspiracy to Destroy a Black Woman, and it said that Eurocentric white supremacists said it was clear. The relationship of a black man and black woman has to be destroyed. because it took that love, that's the power of black love, to overthrow the Constitution of the United States. We got together and used the Constitution in our favor when it wasn't written on the behalf of us. Now, man, if our communities aren't fragmented even more, they said we can't let them ever come back together, because that need to go beyond survival and live, the pursuit of happiness, is real. And for us, it is to, by nature, it is to be a communal people living unto the Creator. And when people see that or feel that within inside themselves, the African diaspora, we can't stop. And we got to get to that. But that's how you know we're dealing with an amnesia, because that is not who we've been. And the loss of the metaphysical literacy. When you don't know your Ubuntu connection to the smallest of things, it produces a being that is completely, and I never liked this word, but I'm going to say it, subhuman. Any person that does not have the ability to feed themselves and continue to live in a society that you have to wait for somebody to give you food, and you have to be able to fight to earn money so that you could feed your family, subhuman. They keep us dependent, not being able to function from our own will, resources, skill sets. They don't want that. They don't want a global experience of Burkina Faso. Can you imagine a global experience of Burkina Faso where there is no loss of metaphysical literacy, where we understand the connectedness of who we are as a people to our land and to each other and humanity? Man, please. But the majority of us are stuck in a spiritual amnesia, which is nothing more than a disconnection from your original identity. Everybody suffers from this. Everybody does, even me. But there's levels to this game. And I always tell people when they interacted with me and they talking to me and I'm like, you want to help me? I need you to come up, because if you can come up high enough to see what I'm doing, then maybe I can get better, because I need somebody. I always need a mirror image. That group process that my community used to have. Sitting in a circle with everybody who had like minds and everybody striving for their best self. Becoming cool, becoming what you already are, the science of becoming what you already are. Loved it, because we all strived to be our greatest selves for the sake of the liberation of our people and redemption to our people around the world. And took on and still stand in the responsibility to heal the world, heal humanity by our efforts. That is the Pan-African Orthodox Christian Church. If you want to know, you can look it up. And so when that happens, when we are disconnected from our original identity, what happens to us? We easily become a product of our environment. And I remember seeing this. I'm a product of my environment growing up and never thought it was anything, but didn't realize, I said, well, that's not bad, because if your environment is good, then, you turn out okay. I love where I grew up. Not understanding that there was an identity inside me that was higher than the one I was moving toward. I didn't know that I was a conditioned being and functioning from a state of spiritual amnesia. I wish I knew then what I know now. And in that space of becoming a product of your environment, you suffer deep-seated memory loss through the experience of trauma. And this is the problem with, Black history. You don't study history before colonialism. You study people who had to shift in survival mode to make things better so that they could just eat. That's not real history. That's trauma porn. Sorry, y'all can argue with me if you want to. Because trauma travels. It is literally a space, has like a spaceship. I mean, it goes where one has never gone before. Trauma travels inside your bloodline. Trauma travels as memory inside your behavior. Trauma travels in the midst of your belief system. And trauma travels in your nervous system. And we talked about that. You can't escape this. This spiritual amnesia travels from generation to generation to generation to generation. And so when we start talking about breaking chains, these are the chains we're trying to break. We're trying to free ourselves from that spiritual amnesia experience, where we can function from an identity that comes straight from the inner sovereignty, inner governance from you and God. You and the Most High. That divine consciousness within you. It's inside everybody. But trauma don't play. Trauma said, look, I'm going where you go. And if you have a child, you will have a child born with your trauma. And it's not because, it's ignorance. Well, like anything, memory, it's cellular. We embody the trauma. We embody it. It's in our structure. That's the sad part. You don't know why sometimes you fear certain things and you just fear it. It's in your blood. Now, the same way we have, and they call it epigenetic trauma. Memory is cellular. It's embodied. Whether you've been physically through it or not, it's in you. This is not metaphoric. This is real. Memory is cellular. And so you got to go in deep within inside yourself to change that cellular experience to get out of survival mode. And I'm always saying you have to go past your own personal trauma, your own personal life, which is nothing. No disrespect, sorry. It's nothing. Because once you get past that personal trauma, you got to go down through your family's trauma, the trauma of your father's side and the trauma of your mother's side. You are 50% two individuals, and in that 50%, you got pieces of their trauma in your system. So not only are you dealing with your trauma from your life, you're dealing with the trauma of your mama's life, and then the trauma of your father's life. And then he's dealing with he got what you got from your father and your mama was the trauma of the generation before that, and the generation before that, and the generation before that. You got to go all the way back. And I always say this the same way we have transgenerational curses that give us this survival mode that we hold on to. We also got transgenerational blessings. That memory inside you that takes you back to the Ubuntu experience. We're going to get there in a few minutes. But in this space, there's a psychological aspect of it too. And that amnesia, that psychological, spiritual amnesia produces so many. And this is the short list. Anxiety. Because if you remember who you are, what you're anxious about. Competition instead of cooperation. This is why black folk can't get together. Trust within community. Amnesia, you forget the power of a collective force, communalism. Fear of inner stillness. This is why it's hard to get black men in the churches in meditative states. They don't like stillness because in stillness, you truly find out that there's so much more work to do than what you've ever done before. Identity fragmentation. You're only a piece of who you are. Broken up. You can't be whole. And so when you're having those things, and there's something else coming up in here, I'll get to it that I want to talk about. And then you have ABI, and come that phrase and terminology comes from my community. The acceptance of black inferiority. When you've accepted that just because you black in a white man's world, you can't do anything. Psychological amnesia. Spiritual amnesia has psychological ailments or issues. We have a lot of pre-existing issues, don't we? Hyper individualism. Hyper individualism. Yeah, it's just about you. Nervous system burnouts, tired all the time and stressed all the time, slow, your body balling up, you knotting up around your body because you're dealing with spiritual amnesia issues. Survival-based masculinity and femininity. Ooh. You use your gender for the sake of getting over. And it's a sad scenario. Because, sisters, I was told by the founder of my community, my church, he said when the black woman starts living like a black man, exploiting herself to the fullest, you can call the black community quits. Is that not happening? I'm sitting there like, oh my goodness. Spiritual consumerism. You're like, what? Yeah, you can't pick not one discipline and stay focused. I know individuals who will take all the information, yet act and produce nothing great. You can't be focused and centered. You got to take everything. And there's nothing wrong with taking anything as long as it produces something. The addiction to urgency, and this is that hit the street and grind. I got to grind hard. And I hate this phrase. I got to get that bag. Man, we are so broken as a people in terms of our thinking and how we got to hustle hard to survive, and they call that success. That's not success. That's spiritual amnesia. Then you have a passive enslavement, being passive to enslavement, where well, it is what it is. So I'm gonna just was it YOLO, YOLO, you only live once. That behavior is endowed with spiritual amnesia. Because it gives you no purpose. None. But hyper individualism, thinking about your own pleasures. This is what colonialism has done to us. Slavery has done to us. It is that mindset. And this is what we have to break. It takes work. And the first thing that you can do, and we talked about this with the kids, and I sat down and they know it, is you can take time to start remembering before slavery. We focus on Black History Month and we go crazy as a community in the African American world. And there were certain people that we would celebrate that I could never celebrate at one point, and I understood why, and I learned, and I did rituals to ask for forgiveness and then appreciate the things that they've done. But there's always more. For me, it was always easier for me to celebrate individuals who wanted for us not to be in a slave state. Not trying to integrate, trying to overthrow the psychological conditioning so that we could live as men on earth as any other version of man. But when we talk about remembering beyond slavery, we're not talking about history. You said, what? I'm not talking about studying African history. That is a component. But just studying African history is not going to get you to function out of a state of amnesia. It's more than that. You have to go to the point where you're remembering your African metaphysics. You're remembering intellectual sovereignty. You're remembering communal governance. You're remembering spiritual legacy. Remembering. It's more than just studying somebody who was. It's studying who you are. I am African metaphysics. I am intellectually sovereign. The information comes directly from the ancestors and the creator. I belong to a community who always struggles and fights to function from a communal governance. We live as one. And I remember our spiritual legacy. We are God's chosen. We were built with a body, this melanin, that it helps us harmonize with the universe. We can feel each other before, if a mother has something with a child and the child is in another state, she wakes up, my kid. That's that spiritual legacy, that connection, that's Ubuntu, metaphysics, communal governance, connectedness. It's all of it. And so when we tap into that, that's when we can sit down and get to a space and place and time where, even again, before civilization, where we was a harmonious people, we had families, we had abundance of all things, physical and non-physical, an abundance of all things. And that's why it is about, you got to get back. You have to be able to get back to dealing with the constitution of man. You got to address all of these things, not just one of them. You can't sit down and say, I'm going to go to church, but I'm not going to read nothing deep to change my thinking. I'm going to eat like a slave and expect to have a king or queen or a God's body. I'm not going to tap into the memory within my own DNA to find out what I'm supposed to do or capable of. And then I don't put no effort into trying something that can propel my understanding into a certain level of usage to the creator. I'm a vessel. And so it's important for us. It's definitely important for us to get to that point. And the 3 steps that we can work on, and that is 1, to our recovery. Recovering, getting back to the constitution of man where everything is lining up. And it doesn't happen overnight. This recovery structure does not happen overnight. And that's where I have to develop patience. Because when you realize that, you know what, and I have people who said that they're supposed to be vessels being used to turn an amnesia mindset into a distant history. They are supposed to help with the cure. So in that space, I believe that there should be an urgency of work ethic where you don't allow this. And let me go back because there's one I didn't cover. The over-identification with trauma. And I know I didn't say it because I didn't. We have a thing that when we're triggered, we cannot see past our own amnesia. You triggered my feeling of. You triggered this feeling of. And then you use the person as the person was the means. You did it. But the initial amnesia and initial trauma was triggered because of colonialism. Sometimes the system in which we live in, which is an enemy system, uses us against us. And I can tell sometimes I've been used to trigger other people's trauma out of the sake of having addiction to urgency. I'm talking about me. Can you be honest with you? Someone asked me and said, she's all you care about is is the mission. I said, exactly. If you cannot work with me going toward this space, yeah, okay, have a nice life. Because I have to get here. I at the end of my call, I want to be able to have my consciousness, my spirit, my soul, to be able to transition to the realm of the ancestors. And as I go into the field of the creator, to say, I did that thing. Man, I can't wait, because I'm going to do this thing. But I have to also be conscious that some people do have an over-identification of their trauma. And that's how they get that identity. And they can't let it go. Whatever they feel that hurts them, that becomes the only thing that they can see. Why? Because it is a part of our amnesia. It is what we know. What we know. And sometimes they use it to connect it with that hyper-individualism, where once they feel that, they want to isolate themselves, and you can't heal in that space. You can't. And I know that my tolerance level for that is small if we're supposed to be walking this healing path together. But I know my level of compassion, my X chromosome has to get bigger. My Y chromosome has to develop some compassion. And I can understand that, and I can get that. And so when we're dealing with rebuilding your inner constitution, yeah, you got to change how you process life. Your accountability of time, how you eat, your diet, all of that. Meditation, prayer. What discipline are you going to be a part of? You got to address all of it. What enhances my spirit to the Most High? Rebuild that conscious institution. How can I feed my mind so my mind returns and it keeps an eye on accessing my best self? What can I do with my body? Some people over accentuate their body, muscles out of here. Oh, I'm a gym rat, but you're nothing else. Nothing else. I remember asking a sister, yeah, other than your body and your will, what part of your memory, mind, or your spirit that is enhanced so that you're balanced? You know what I got? Huh? I'm sorry. That was years ago, but it was funny, right? But we have to be able to rebuild that inner constitution that governs our relationship and connection to the Most High. It governs our relationship and connection to our ancestors. It governs our relationship and connection to the land and each other. And then you have to recognize collective amnesia. We have something called a collective psychology as a people. And then it doesn't matter where you go as a black person. You consider the black person, and they have an idea of what that means. So we have to recognize collective amnesia. We have to understand the amnesia in yourself. What you don't see perfect about you in terms of your constitutions, in your spirit, in your mind, in your body, in your memory, in your willpower. You got to be able to recognize your own deficiencies. And then you have to be able to recognize the deficiencies in others and be able to help them. Like you help yourself when you learn your deficiencies. I knew what my deficiencies was, and I put a break on it. And said, brother, you got to pull back. Let's go. You're not lined up. And then in that space, I sat down and I said, okay, well, each time I look at it, I go back through my constitutions. When it comes to recognizing my amnesia, and say, how far in my spirit am I? How far in my mind am I? My body, my memory, my will. How much am I pulling further away from that space? Being able to see it around in a group, and then am I surrounded by a group of individuals who seek to rid themselves from that amnesia? You have to recognize the collective amnesia, and then not fault somebody from their own amnesia. Patience. If we don't grow patience with each other, and that's what hit me this week. patience. So I need to call some people that I know that I had no patience with and apologize. Whether they accept it or not, patience. Why? Because I see what you were functioning from was your amnesia, and I was functioning from my frustration of you not understanding what I'm saying. Trying to get the two parties to function less and less from that psychological deficiency. Then you have restore the prefactured identity. And that's that brokenness. I had an image here. And you see with the brother in the back when the mind is all, let's get it. You can see it in this one. How can you get back from that? How can you restore that prefactured identity? And that's by going again back to see who we were before colonialism. You gotta go in. You have to go in and repair those fractions. You gotta do that shadow work, that breath work. You got to understand I'm not a product of my environment. If I'm a child of the Most High, then who is the Most High called me to be? You don't get your identity from your environment. You get your conditioning from it. You get your identity from your relationship, Ubuntu relationship to the Most High. Who are you before you open your eyes? Who are you before you engage the world? That's the question you have to ask. Who am I? Before any of this, who am I? And when we get the Keebaland to announce that I'm a child of God, what does that mean? What are your capabilities? What parts of you where you can see your amnesia? And what parts of your constitution that you need to work on? Look at it in your spirit, in your mind, in your body, in your nervous system. Look at it in your memory. Who are you called? And this past week, we discussed it with the kids. So because of the same Ubuntu lessons we're having with them as we're having with you. And in this space, I told them, I said, well, adults and your parents are different because the adults, the lessons are basically the topics are almost the same. However, when you're dealing with adults, we have to deconstruct. We have to take apart. Ajay, yes, what is deconstruct? We have to take it apart. We have to take apart what they learned because it was all incorrect. This is what we're doing. This is why you live in a state of amnesia. And we have to act slowly because if you do it too fast, yeah, that can cause some trauma too. In certain African spiritual systems, and that's where you can heal your fractured identity by indulging yourself in some African spiritual systems, some rituals. It's cultural, traditional. It'll give you back your relationship to God. This is why all African names are spiritual in nature, cultural in nature. Why? Because it's going to make sure you have a whole identity with your name. And so I tell the kids, well, we have to repair the parents. But with you, the youth, we just got to help continue to shape you. And I said, if we can get the kids before they're 12, it's easier. But when they're 12 and they live in a survival mindset, we're going to have to deal with some issues. Now, if your kid is younger than 12 and you're having personality issues, that means the power of amnesia in our dynamics of the conditioned society in which we live in, it's getting stronger. So we have where we are trying to structure a kid's life, thinking, and experiences where they get to be all they can be. And this is a very important one. And so with this, it's funny. So the person that showed me how to do this social media marketing, I ain't spoken to her in a long time. She just called me. And if you can hear me, I'll be there in a few seconds. Don't go nowhere. Stay on the phone. I'm live streaming. Look at DaAfrican Speaks. And so in this space, we are creating an experience for the children to be formed from Ubuntu from the ground up, where we don't have to deconstruct their thinking. We can move it toward them being able to understand who they are in the Creator. And with that being said and done, with us doing it on the level of our children and us being able to do it on the level of adults, we are creating the experience of the Ubuntu generation. And if you can do that with us, I won't be the only African that speaks. You will too. Watch the African in you rise, and the voice inside you that is African speak according to your divine creation. With that being said, one love.